you love movies and movie discussions, you've come to the right place. Who am I, you ask? I am the Wiz! And I'm here to review the 1973 comedy American Graffiti, starring Ron Howard, Harrison Ford, Richard Dreyfuss, Paul Lamont, Charles Martin Smith, and Cindy Williams, directed by George Lucas. Yeah, this is the movie that George Lucas did before Star Wars. In fact, I think the money he made from this movie went into the development of Star Wars, and if I recall the story correctly, I know many others already know that story, so I won't get into it, or I'll let other people talk about that story. This was a very important film in Lucas's career because of that fact. But many people seem to forget this movie, or if they do remember it, they don't remember it being a George Lucas film. They just remember it as that teen film set in the 50s and 60s. But honestly, I can see why, but before I get into that, let's get into the plot of American Graffiti. This is basically about four guys, and the four guys are Steve, played by Ron Howard, John, played by Paul Lamont, Curt, played by Richard Dreyfuss, and Terry, played by Charles Martin Smith. All four guys are on the last day of their summer vacation, where a couple of them have to decide what they're going to do with their lives after high school. And that's the plot of the movie, really. All four characters go into different plots and different stories throughout the film. For example, Curt is basically trying to find a young blonde woman that he found driving a T-Bird. Steve is trying to break up with his girlfriend Lori, played by Cindy Williams, and trying to make her understand that he needs space when he goes to college. John, on the other hand, is cruising the entire town looking for a guy that he hears is trying to race him. And then finally you have Terry, who is cruising in Steve's car trying to pick up chicks, and he finds one in Debbie, played by Candy Clark. The first thing you're going to notice right away when you're watching American Graffiti is that it wears its nostalgia on its sleeves. It is a very nostalgic based film. It's got a ton of great music. It's got a setting that is very evocative of the 50s, even though I believe it's set in 62, but a lot of people seem to think that the 50s aesthetic kind of died around this time. But the film really is about how life was for these young kids in this small town. And the film does a good job of showing what their life was like before they become adults. What I will say, though, is that it's not entirely deep, and that's probably because of the fact that it splits into four stories. But it's also that the film is meant to be more of a comedy. It's meant to be more of a joyful kind of thing. A lot of funny things happen in the movie. And some of the plot lines are better than others. For example, I think the Curt and Steve plot lines are okay, but they're kind of generic in a sort of way. They've been done in other movies before. They've been done better in other movies. I think the John and Terry plot lines are better. The Terry plot line is very funny. Terry basically is trying to impress this girl and trying to get with her, and is doing a bunch of things that is not normally something he does. It's funny trying to see him try to live up to this girl's expectations. But the John plot line, I think, is the best one, mainly because it involves John, who is cruising for this one person who wants to race him, but he also gets saddled with this young girl named Carol, who is played really well by Mackenzie Phillips. I really like the back and forth between these two characters, even though it gets kind of a little weird at times. It's really the best part of the movie, because I find Mackenzie Phillips very charming in this movie. I think she's very funny. I think that the way that Paul Lamont and Mackenzie Phillips play with each other in this film is actually really well done. I really like Carol in this movie. I think that she was easily the funniest character in the film. But in terms of the character I like the most, I like John the most, honestly, because he does show a very tough exterior and he shows a very masculine exterior, but as the film goes on, he shows this more sensitive side. Yeah, that's kind of stereotypical in these types of movies. Oh, the bad boy actually has a heart. Ooh, how surprising. But the way that Paul Lamont actually plays this character, I think was very well done. It makes him incredibly likable in this movie. That said, the film does have a overarching theme throughout the film. It's the end of these guys being kids, being teenagers, and turning into men. Some are going to college, and some are trying to find out what they want to do after this. But I don't think the theme hits as hard as I think the film thinks it does. The film relies very much on the nostalgia with the music and the way everything looks and feels and how everyone acts. But I think other films take this theme and do a much better job with it. One example I would give is Lady Bird. I think Lady Bird from Greta Gerwig in the 2010s does a much better job showing a teenager starting to grow into a young adult. The other movie I would also say, and some might find this a little odd, but I would also say Dazed and Confused does a much better job showing these exact same themes with different characters, but I think in a much more emotionally potent way. And it also gets the feel of just how kids are, specifically teenagers, how they hang out, how they interact. I think Dazed and Confused does a much better job in these themes than I would say American Graffiti does in this. But I will also say American Graffiti, I think, really wears its nostalgia on its sleeve a lot deeper than I would say Dazed and Confused is. Dazed and Confused is also nostalgic in its own way, but I think that American Graffiti uses it much more adeptly, but because it uses that nostalgia and the way the look and the feel and the music is in this movie, I think it relies on it more than I think Dazed and Confused does. But that's why I think Dazed and Confused is a much better movie when it comes to the themes of an end of innocence or growing into an adult. And let me get to the footnotes of American Graffiti. What was the point of the after the movie info? At the end of the movie, American Graffiti does what some movies do at times with their characters, and they go, this guy went on to be a senator, this guy went on to do this guy went on to do that. And it seemed kind of odd because one, these weren't real people, and two, what they did with it was super depressing. This is like a very happy movie, very nostalgic, warm movie. And then you learn at the end of the movie through this info dump that, oh, by the way, two of these people died tragically. Why? Why was that necessary? Why would you do that? It's like, wait a minute, hold on. Like, I would rather it be either implied or have people have conversations going, I wonder what happened to those kids after that. And then there's a dickhead like me going, yeah, probably one of them died in Vietnam, right? No kidding, right? That would suck. But instead it's like, oh yeah, one died in Vietnam and the other died in a tragic car accident. Like, why? Why was that necessary? There was no point in doing that in this movie, but oh well, it's in there. I really didn't see the reason to have that there. So overall, I'm going to recommend American Graffiti. I think it is a fine movie. I think it's fun. It's funny in certain spots. Two of the plot lines are better than the other, that being the John and Terry plot lines. I think they are the most entertaining. The ones with Curt and Steve aren't bad, but they've been done before countless times in other movies, and they've been done better in that aspect. The film's main thing is to show a previous time period in a glorified manner and show the positives, like the music, the cars, the way the people dressed, and how they acted, and how funny and fun they were. Really, the theme of the end of an innocent time, or the end of childhood and becoming an adult, is really not that important in this movie. It's fun, it's definitely entertaining, and I found myself enjoying the film as I was watching it, but when comparing to movies like Lady Bird, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Dazed and Confused, hell, even The Breakfast Club, I would say, is probably a deeper, much more emotionally resonant film than this is. But I think it's fine. It's good for what it is. So overall, I will recommend American Graffiti. It's a good movie. I enjoyed it. I guess I'm a little surprised by how beloved this movie is to some. Unless you lived during that time period, then I can completely understand why. So overall, I recommend American Graffiti. It's a good movie. Not great. Check it out on Netflix if you have not seen it. Now, if you want my full review on this movie, you can go to my website at IamTheWiz.com. You'll have my full written review right on the site, along with a link to the video that has this review that you've just listened to. Thank you for listening to this review. If you want to know what we're reviewing in the next couple days, you can look on the screen right now to see what's coming up next. If you liked what you heard, go ahead and leave a like on this video. If you want to discuss your opinion on the film or the review itself, please leave a comment. And if you want to hear more, subscribe to the channel. Thank you again for listening. I will talk to you next time.